as I was saying, we do have people from all over the Arctic in this webinar today. So I'm going to start with today's land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of the diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, sorry about that little blip there. This is a presentation on Arctic economy and business development. We have about 30 minutes for our panel discussion, followed by 20 minutes where we will have the opportunity to put some of your questions to the speakers. To keep things simple and to make sure we can get as many questions as possible, we have enabled the Q&A function, and you can find that in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you ask a question in the chat, it probably won't be able to come through, so that is why we have the Q&A function for that. Feel free to post your questions throughout the session. And lastly, I'd like to remind you that it is being recorded, and those who are registered will receive a link to the event in a follow-up email. So it is my great pleasure to officially introduce our moderator, Michael Carey. Michael Carey is the CEO, managing partner of the Kennard Group, a business managing residential, commercial service, and installation businesses in the Mid-Atlantic and Michigan. Michael has spent all of his professional career in the industrial and residential service and construction industry. Originally getting his start in plumbing as an owner-operator, Michael has grown the Kennard Group with his partner to over 100 employees and 4 companies, focusing primarily on HVAC and plumbing. His focus is on keeping existing brands, staffing, and local leadership growing with them within the markets. Kennard is 100% privately owned business and does not manage any PE or LP structures. And he is also the founder of the UArctic Entrepreneurship Fund, which had a call go out in June with a deadline in October that you'll probably hear a little bit about as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn off my camera here, and Michael, you can take over.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, it's great to have everybody here. We're really happy to host not only a great group of panelists, but also hopefully some great attendees in the crowd with some great questions. Before we get going, really diving into the meat of today's discussion, I wanted to actually go around and let the panelists introduce themselves. And so just to start that off, Chris, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Very nice to meet all of you. I'm Chris Patchy. I am the Vice President of Research at Aurora College. Aurora College in the Northwest Territories. This is also I'm on the traditional territories of the Chief Dry-Geese Territory, which is the Yellowknives Dene, and the Claycho and the Métis here in Yellowknife, also known as Sambucay. Denendeh is most of the Northwest Territories, along with the Inuit Nunangat, which is the Nunavut settlement region up in the Beaufort Delta. So that's just the land acknowledgement. I know that here in Canada, we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action, and education has been part of the colonial process, and we recognize that past and our desire to change that and have better relations with Indigenous communities, governments, and we are guests here in Denendeh and Inuit Nunangat. So that's just a little bit about the land acknowledgement. As the Vice President of Research at the college, I'm based in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, but we also have research centers in Inuvik and in Fort Smith. Nice to be here.
Thanks so much, Chris. Hillary, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks. Great to be here. I am the community manager and co-founder of Reclaim Collaborative Design Organization. We work in community-led infrastructure and knowledge sharing. In particular, we're looking at supporting different groups that see an unmet need in their community and then have a vision for how they'd like to collectively create a better built environment together. Mainly that can be through housing development, conservation projects, and any types of community infrastructure and economic development. Earlier this year, we did receive a $5,000 grant from the UArctic Entrepreneurship Fund, and that has really helped us kickstart and start to explore the Northern Arctic areas more deeply. So that's where we're hoping to shift our future work in the space. Outside of that, I also work in the international education space and have trained in sociocratic and consent-based decision-making. And I'm based out of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Perfect. Thank you, Hillary. Randi.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to be here. My name is Randi Johannessen. I am working for Statistics Norway, as a head of the government financial statistics. But today I am representing the Econor project. I have been since 2022 involved in the Econor fifth report, and the Econor report is the economy of the North, and that is a comprehensive overview of the economy of the circumpolar Arctic, including the traditional nature-based economic activities of the indigenous people. So this work has given me a great opportunity to look further into what we are going to discuss today in the panel debate. Thank you.
Perfect. So with this great host of panelists, we wanted to kind of open up 20 minutes here to go through some key discussion items we had as major focuses for the panel. During that time, obviously, as Lisa had mentioned, feel free to bring your own questions in, and we'll then move into a Q&A session after that 20-minute time period. One of the really interesting and I think very topical questions to sort of open this panel up is, and I kind of am going to present this broadly to the panel. What are the most significant economic opportunities currently emerging in the Arctic that you guys are seeing, right? What are key challenges we're facing? If you are an entrepreneur or you are a business operating in an Arctic region, what do you think that is? Infrastructure, financing, regulation? Just want to kick that over to the panel.
Yeah, so Michael, if I could start, your
Go ahead.
business with HVAC is really important. We are seeing a 4-degree increase in the Beaufort Delta. We've had multiple 30+ Celsius days in home construction that has no air conditioning, no HVAC for heat pumps, for example. And so we never thought we'd ever have to close because of heat, but we've closed our offices multiple times because of heat, and we're seeing also increased pressures from wildfires and other climate implicated impacts. So as a major sort of economic opportunity or challenge, really the context in which we're working and living in the Arctic is changing radically, and it's not changing in the same way in every part of the Arctic. It's changing differently across the circumpolar.
Yeah, perfect. Hillary.
To build on that a little bit with the more the community localized, more grassroots perspective that we mainly work within, I am really seeing more of a cultural shift away from the global lens and more looking at how can we support our local communities. So with all the changes that are happening, the rapid kind of speed at which food security, development and infrastructure building, all those elements that really affect day-to-day life in the region, by empowering more local communities to really look at the opportunities and risks that they see within their area, you can start to see local communities kind of empowered, take that the decision making and new initiatives that they're going to undertake under their own belt and really have things that are going to meet those kind of microclimate or more localized needs that we see emerge.
I think it's an interesting topic that then everyone's kind of harking back to a similar sound here, which is infrastructure, right? Is a serious challenge economically. I know amongst my own peer group, and I actually know, for example, some what we would call mechanical providers in Yellowknife. Actually, I have some customers on the software side I know up there. Um, I, there are unique challenges, let alone with home building. I understand up there, but also you think about a heat pump, like you mentioned, Chris, it has to be warm in the winter, warm enough for a heat pump to work. Otherwise, you need furnaces or boilers, and then, of course, you're having to bring in energy that's self-destructive to the environment, right? It's not powered by electricity through renewables, so it's kind of a catch-22. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a huge issue. And I was thinking about this on the deployment of EV infrastructure, the electric vehicle infrastructure. So there's charging now and direct charging in many of the big centers. And there's enough charging so that you can drive from southern Canada into Yellowknife or into Fort Smith or Hay River and still be able to get back with your electric vehicle. Even in Inuvik, for example, there's electric vehicle charging. And we do have a windmill there and we have a lot of solar capacity. But part of the challenge is that a lot of that electricity is diesel generated. And in particular in the communities, there are microgrids that are based on diesel generation. And So any EV that you would bring into a community, you're using diesel to generate the electricity for it. So it kind of cancels itself out in terms of a net savings. Um, there are larger issues for sure, and it's really interesting to have Randy on board, because some of the issues that we see a lot of investments are around security, for example, and that's increasing as the relationships internationally change. I don't disagree with Hillary with what you're saying about the local, but some of those larger influences of resource extraction, climate change, security, those are some big drivers right now in the Arctic.
Yeah, that is correct, Chris. We have seen, at least for the last couple of years, more geopolitical tensions. Uh, we don't know yet where that brings us, but because if you're looking at the traditional view of the Arctic, it is associated with mining, pulp and paper, oil and gas extraction, fisheries and tourism. But we also know that the geopolitical tensions are increasing, and well, yet we haven't seen so much in when I was working with the Econor report. I we didn't see so much industries around security, but it was always there, uh, discussing what will be the next part. What we see is going on, of course, like new business opportunities is, as you have pointed out, it's energy, renewable energy, and a lot of investment is now done to make more reliable, more reliable renewable energy. Like instance, we see large scale of solar parks, but that is also making us vulnerable. And also the wind turbine, of course, is making climate affects the climate, and it's also affect the local communities. But also large scales of solar parks will also make you vulnerable, because there is you're turning out to the more digital technologies, which will, given if you have if you can see it as an enemy, will try to hurt you in a way, damage in a way, then it's much easier if you have some digital technology. So yes, there is a geopolitical tension. We have not yet seen that this is influencing the businesses much, but I think we will see it during the next years. And what we see now in Norway, being very strategic in the Barents Sea, we see that the military expenses will increase, and that investment will go to investment. The investment will go to military defense rather than renewable energy, rather than developing other economic opportunities. So yes, this will probably most likely affect all business approaches for the coming years.
On that question, I think this actually sort of begs a follow-on to something that we wanted to discuss in this panel, somewhat controversial, but I think very relevant, which is, we're starting to see anyone, you've been at the Arctic Circle assemblies recently, right? There's an energy almost around, I'm using this term controversially on purpose, but almost like a new colonialism looking to the north, right? The ice is thawing, we can get to new resources, everyone wants to rush in. Many of these voices obviously are voices from the global south. And so it's important and interesting to me, having the perspective of someone from the South charitably supporting the North. How do we ensure that economic development benefits local people, right? Respects local culture and land instead of being, a rare earth cash grab, for example, or any of the other controversies we're starting to see. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a fantastic question. I haven't been at the Arctic Council for a while, but I did sit for the Arctic Athabascan Council as an advisor. And so I was there when Finland was the chair, when Iceland was the chair. So I've been there around the table for some of the conversations. And even when the first Arctic Climate Impact Assessment report was being done and the first Arctic Human Development report was being done, the issues around colonialism and imperialism around the circumpolar has always been a concern for people living in the circumpolar. And I think the way it's being addressed here in Denendeh and Inuit and Nungat is that Indigenous governments are having more authority recognized and more of their sovereignty recognized, and as partners within development. The work I've done with Indigenous communities, rarely have I found homogeneity around ideas of development. There's a lot of differences of opinion within communities about what is good development, what's bad development, how will it benefit the communities, how do we capture those benefits? And there's always going to be trade-offs in terms of the impacts on culture, tradition, the way of life, right, going forward. Um, but but as far as I can tell, um, there keeps being adaptation to culture and traditions and changes. And I really liked what Randy was talking about, because it's this tension between modern and traditional. And it's not as if we're going to go to just one or the other. You really need to have a balance there. And it really has to be communities that are in that driver's seat making those decisions. Unfortunately, it tends to be largely done by outside capital or governments that are not necessarily interested in what local communities have to say. I think Canada's showing an improvement in that respect. I think I've seen that with the Sami and in Scandinavian countries as well. Um, we have concerns about what's going on in Russia right now because there isn't that open dialogue. Um, and the issues around what's going on in Alaska right now with some of the executive orders are just phenomenal change in terms of how does that fit within the community. So there's a lot of challenges, I think. We have Bill C5, which are projects of national interest here in Canada that are being put forward. The first response from Indigenous governments was, we want to make sure our rights are recognized and that we're here at the table in terms of making decisions. I see Hillary's nodding, so you probably have something to add.
Yeah, just definitely reiterating the need to have the different people who are going to be impacted around the table in an intentional way. And I think ensuring that especially if we get more outside capital invested in the region, ensuring that that's not steamrolling the local communities or they're being brought in at the end of a process versus really taking that collaborative approach and making sure all perspectives are represented right up front to find those areas of collaboration.
There's something then I feel like we're sort of talking around that's important, right? If we're thinking about, look, change is coming. I think that is largely being accepted to a degree, right? But we're all implying, right, there's better and worse ways to handle the change. So what do you guys think in terms of, okay, we know change is coming, opportunity is coming, because change always presents opportunity, either good or bad, right? How can we use policy or infrastructure, right? You've kind of hinted at a couple to better support innovation and economic growth. And I'm not going to say just in the North, but in the North for the North, I think is a important distinction. How do you guys think that we can better do that?
Well, maybe I should start. Well, I think that we need to have a kind of a strategic infrastructure development, including renewable energy and digital infrastructure. We need to have a kind of a policy that better support innovation and economic growth. But this also need to be balances, as you've said. We need to put in mind that we need the engagement and the knowledge of the indigenous communities. That is very important. And I think also mentioning the agreement that Northern Territories of Canada have with the control of areas of land and water with rich natural resources is also a way to go. But I think also what we just discussed about, we know the changes are coming, and we know that there will be interest in extraction of these rare earth minerals. Well, if we need some kind of guidelines of how could you do that extraction the best way, so that you also keep in mind the climate and the pollution and the biodiversity. So it is extremely important now that because we see that private companies are coming all over from the world, wanted to get into these extraction industries, but I think that the local governments and the governments needs to have some strict rules of how to develop best practice of these new coming industries.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah,
And then Hillary, sorry, you were right behind him, you know.
sounds good. You got to be quick on the draw. This is almost like a game show. But it's not. It's a panel, and we're very happy to have the participants with us. The Certainly the development that's going on, like let's not kid ourselves. We're a very small population here in the Northwest Territories. We're a largely indigenous population outside of Yellowknife. Uh, we don't have anywhere near the population that you would find in Norway or Iceland or Finland, nor do we have the infrastructure. When I drove up to the Tech Highway during the spring, that it's a gravel road that's washed out sometimes between Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk, and it's there largely because it was oil and gas in the Beaufort Delta that was driving that investment. And so there's a lot of needs. I think when capital comes, and we do want capital to come, we do need workers to come. We do need um, um, to capture benefits in a way that's going to last here and be of use also to the national economy. It can't be just for here. It's not NIMBYism. It's not just, whatever is good for me. It has to be collectively good for both the local as well as the regional and national. So, Hillary, hopefully you can build on that.
Yeah, absolutely echoing both what you and Randy are saying there. In terms of approaching it, I think looking at as best a regional approaches can happen. I know coming from Newfoundland and Labrador, we've had some resource extraction problems with the cod fisheries here, and that kind of completely impacting the entire province when things went south with that. So looking for ways that we can allow kind of international investment in the region, but ensure that there isn't a loss of that capital outside of the countries that are collaborating towards that. Outside of that, I think policies around simplifying grants through government for more grassroots community-led projects, allowing communities to really quickly test out and iterate what their needs are and innovations that they can implement. I think rapid change is the theme that I've been seeing a lot with the communities we've been talking to. So ensuring that they're ready to take on opportunities as they come, and it's not a system where access to either the people or the money that they need to take on new projects to be ready for greater investment. They're not kind of behind the wheel. They're taking a more proactive approach around that. Outside of that, any way that digital networks can be used to empower local entrepreneurs and businesses in the region, I think that's an important infrastructure, not just to ensure people have access, but that there are systems in place for collaboration in a digital space.
Makes sense.
If I could just add
Go ahead,
something also,
please.
that because we are talking about developing the new infrastructure, but what we should also be aware of, if the permafrost is melting, that could cause damage to the existing infrastructure. So we also need to be aware that we need some upgrading of the facilities to withstand climate shocks to achieve long-term viability. So it's also the existing infrastructure that could be vulnerable with what's going on with climate.
I know that this is what a lot of my kind of comrades in the industry have spoken to about house building being very challenging there because the foundations are permanently shifting. I think ultimately, right, going back to we have these challenges, but on the entrepreneurial side, if the spirit is there, maybe it's opportunities. Maybe we can create new ways to build homes that are innovative, right? And I kind of on the topic you guys had mentioned, it leads to a nice segue to our next question. Before I go into that, I thought as the sort of state's representative here, putting aside, I think we can all accept the current administration's, I'll even call it probably overt hostility to many of the things I've said today. The Alaska Permanent Fund, I think, is a pretty interesting and innovative thing. Very not traditionally U.S. style thing that was done in terms of bringing resource extraction wealth back into northern communities. Which, for those of you who may not be aware, who are listening in, all the oil and mineral rights that were extracted, basically they have to pay a dividend to a permanent fund that's managed by the state of Alaska, very similar to the sovereign wealth fund in Norway, for example, that's then distributed as a universal basic income to all Alaskan citizens. So just something interesting. And that kind of, again, like I said, teased me up. We wanted to talk about these challenges, unique challenges. What are some innovative approaches to entrepreneurship or to these problems that you guys have seen succeed in either, remote or northern communities as it relates to the Arctic? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, here in the Northwest Territories, the devolution conversation started later than in the Yukon and in Nunavut. And in that respect, the royalties that come out of resource extraction and development are collected by the federal government, shared with the territorial government, and shared with Indigenous governments. So we have something similar, but it's a much more direct flow of resources that aren't managed just by one of the three levels of government. And I include Indigenous governments as governments because that's their rightful place here in the Northwest Territories, in Inuit, Nunangat, as well as Denendeh. What we're seeing in terms of entrepreneurship, it happens at different levels. It just depends on what we saw. A big run on diamonds, for example, over the last 20, 30 years, because those were what was found. Now it's critical minerals that are being sought after, and again, gold, because the price of gold is high, and that's kind of here in Sambucay, it means the place of dollars because the gold mine was here, but that name predates. It's a Yellowknife's Dene name for the location of Yellowknife. But there's a real difference, though, in investing in local and smaller scale, small, medium-sized enterprises as compared to some of these larger industries. And it would be interesting to hear from Hillary and Randy how they see it kind of playing out in different parts of their research with the circumpolar.
And before one of you guys jumps in really quick, I just wanted to remind all of our guests, please make sure you're submitting any questions you might have in the Q&A. We'll be ready to transition there in about 5 to 10 minutes. Back to you, Randy.
Yes. Well, some other examples of innovative approaches is, of course, as we have mentioned already, the renewable energy. But what we also see is waste to energy initiatives, turning local waste into energy. We see the ecotourism is growing. Of course, still we see that cruise tourism is significant, but we see that ecotourism is taking into account this unique and authentic cultural experiences that we find in the Arctic. We see that the ecotourism highlight the natural beauty and the indigenous heritage of the region. We see traditional crafts and products, traditional handcrafts, artwork, etc. It's also within new industries. And of course, what we see, especially maybe in Arctic Finland, is that quite high-tech hubs of industries is growing now, like the Nokia, the mobile phone company. They have invested a lot of in technology, trying to start innovative businesses. So we see a lot of things going in data center due to renewable energy is something that we will see. So there is a lot of things going on, and I think what we see now compared to some years ago is that the involvement of the indigenous communities is better than it used to be. But still, of course, we have a way to go also there. But there is a lot going on in the Arctic regions all over, and you find a lot of varieties. In some regions, still, of course, the fishing and hunting are the most significant. But we see some very new initiatives of the businesses as well.
And echoing a lot on my end there, we have seen a lot of a shift to more collaborative technical resources shared between different groups that we've worked with. And we find that helps just governments not have to support the same types of work that's happening over and over again. The more knowledge sharing can become the norm. That's helped our entrepreneurs that we've worked with really speed their business development up and their projects along. In the community-led housing space, we've seen a lot of innovation around types of housing, building materials, heating and planning for air conditioning, and just making sure that it's a very tight air fit building. We've seen as well that as soon as there's a couple businesses that enter the space, that really spurs future innovations and gets more and more excitement around. So I find with the community-led approach, that's becoming more normalized in different regions across Canada. So we're seeing that kind of you light the spark and then you see other entrepreneurs pick up on that energy. So I think the more you can kind of get that critical mass of entrepreneurship there, it does spur that future innovation as well.
That's a near and dear topic to me, being on the actual funding side when it comes to entrepreneurship. Something I want to ask you guys about and kind of share my thoughts in a second. I did want to just point out too to all of our attendees who are listening in, because we weren't sure maybe if everyone knew where to find this. When you're in the Zoom application on the bottom bar where you'd be able to mute your audio or leave Zoom, there is a Q&A button down there. That's where specifically Lisa was talking about submitting any Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to go into that little Q&A section on your bottom bar and enter any questions, and we'll field them when we get to the Q&A section. Back to the entrepreneurship question, I like the analogies that all you guys are making, Randy. You were specifically talking about kind of the critical mass needed for industry to grow. One of the issues I've seen, and part of why we launched UArctic, the entrepreneurship fund, is that industry, right? I wouldn't say there's a ton of developed industry in the north. Lots of entrepreneurs to be, but again, you need scale. I feel like to create self-sustaining. It's like an old growth forest, a healthy economy, right? You really need time. We have a lot of saplings now, and it takes a lot of time to grow. And a challenge that we've seen is kind of getting resources to entrepreneurs in the north. So, I have my own opinion very strongly, obviously, but I wanted to hear from you guys. How do you feel that local entrepreneurs can be supported in that scaling mission, right? How do they take their business beyond the kind of very classic thing you see in small towns, honestly, everywhere? You have the small community business. How do you do that? How do you expand, especially when capital is such a southern thing due to the history we all know? Hillary, go ahead.
For me, I'm really seeing supporting local entrepreneurs as a very multifaceted, multi-strategy approach, with a strong focus on facilitating and accessing mentorship, financing, and the different networks that bring those towards the north, as well as respecting and incorporating northern values as they do that, with a big focus on community cohesion and sustainability for really getting a community to adopt entrepreneurship at a kind of high level as well. In particular, some more specific initiatives, introducing more support mechanisms, whether that's establishing regional cooperatives that can look at things from a more regional lens, or different business clusters to help facilitate the sharing of resources in the region. Increased access to mentorship and training that are really tailored to local needs and local industries. And then creating more grant and loan programs that really have a strong focus on that community-owned, community-led and culturally relevant businesses. I think another element there is different growth models. So having more gateway type infrastructures like co-working spaces and business incubators, especially in larger centers where you do have more population there. And then looking at different structures that you can implement to enable participation in more regional, national, and then international markets while retaining that community control. So having more of kind of a unified approach on how the region would like to manage that.
That makes a lot of sense. Have you seen anything that's impressed you in that approach?
Not any, I guess, particular developments at the moment, but more the interest in it. Almost every single community we've spoken to, almost every entrepreneur that we've talked to, they have an interest. They want to share their knowledge and resources. They want to collaborate. it's very challenging to get the mechanisms in place to have a true partnership, and just have the time when everything is so rapidly changing to be kind of forward thinking versus just trying to scramble in the background and catch up to what's happening.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so as an example, Detancho is a local contracting company that works with, in particular because of the orphan and abandoned mines, both Giant and Con, that are here in Yellowknife. But beyond that, there's a lot of examples of joint ventures where the majority owner are the indigenous governments, and they've captured funds from various sources in terms of those royalty transfers, so they have access to those dollars. And then other entrepreneurs come along who have interests in whatever sector it might be, and they look to build those partnerships and develop, lasting jobs and benefits that are there for the community to realize. Part of the challenge is that it's an uneven distribution. It's very hard to get small scale funding that lasts a long time, that doesn't have as many requirements for a return on the investment from, an angel investor or whoever the investor might be. And partly that's kind of what we need more of, is those funds that come in that are allowed to sit and don't necessarily return the same level as when capital goes and to China and or anywhere else for that matter, where there's large returns on manufacturing or services. And so that's part of our challenge as well, is that we're always going to be small. We're always going to have a logistics supply chain issue because we're really good in terms of what Randy was talking about. Like, you want to see Northern Lights, you come here. You want to get beaver mitts, beading that on the moccasins, you come here. This is where you get it. You might get a replica from China or somewhere else, but it's not produced here. And the hides are produced here. The animals are harvested here in a sustainable, humane way that they've always been harvested by Indigenous people for generations. And so those are the things that attract people here to have part of that northern experience. To see the reindeer in Finland is amazing. You don't see anybody rounding up and milking caribou here in the Northwest Territories because it's a different kettle of fish, but it's really interesting to see those variations around the circumpolar and the kinds of experiences that you have here, as well as the kinds of investments in the Arctic, have to be different than what you would think about in the South or elsewhere.
I've had two kind of interesting thoughts I'll follow up on there. For those, listening in, just on the knowledge side, we've run the entrepreneurship fund for two full cycles. We're in our third cycle now, funding pre-seed, like very beginning, pre-MVP, what we would call minimal viable product entrepreneurs. And these are small, $5,000 to $10,000 US starts to get them going. But we've had pretty big success in the first five we funded, including one who has already gone out now to formally raise. They've made it to a true seed round where they're, raising on a $3 to $10 million valuation. And two of the things I think have really stuck with me and been interesting is one, I think it's important, more than important, absolutely critical that we discuss these items because entrepreneurship is a spirit of creativity, right? No different than the arts, which to me means it's cultural. And when there's opportunity in the North, if Northern entrepreneurs aren't there filling that space, it's no different than losing your language or losing your art being pushed onto you. The creative energy that you could express in entrepreneurship will be taken by people who are opportunistic from the global South. And so building the roots of entrepreneurship are critical, I think, to have that rhythm and that cultural really preservation. And the second thing that I think is really unique, and from UArctic, I think we can really speak to this, is that a lot of the challenges facing the North today that can present, again, opportunities are unified, right? The Arctic shares a lot of very similar issues. So when you take one slice of one community, well, there's not enough people to make a really scalable business. But if we actually think of the circumpolar North, there is, right? Now you have a much bigger market, sort of in the traditional sense, to play in, where you're sharing at least some similar challenges. So we've kind of seen that thinking opportunistically like that, and even talking to potential investors, like in this company that we're successfully spinning out of the fund to go raise, they've been able to get better traction because the target market is more attractive, right, to traditional capital, which I also agree we need. It's sort of a double-edged sword. But using that forest analogy, right? You need water if you're a sapling, and if they've got all the water, you got to kind of play this game. So something I just wanted to share based on what we've seen as well. Open to any comments or thoughts. All right, perfect. I think now we're gonna start to make our way into the questions and answers piece. And so, I'm going to go ahead and just thank all of our guests for listening and our panel as well. Obviously, we'll continue answering these as they come through. We have a couple, and I'm going to start with our first. So, Stephen asked, could I ask the panel about what roles they see for role models in education around entrepreneurship in northern communities, especially considering sustainable ways of developing business? What are the gaps, and what are the best examples to point to? Go ahead, Hillary.
For me, one of my favorite examples that I look to for a way to just really embed entrepreneurship at a community level is Smart Ice, a project that stemmed out of Memorial University. They work with Indigenous communities in developing smart ice monitoring technology, but they've been able to do it in a very collaborative approach between the institution, their private business or their nonprofit. They have worked with Choices for Youth, a local organization that supports at-risk youth for the development of construction skills and training, and actually creating the Smart Ice technology that vehicles that they use. And then they have made a strong connection in the north with training on that end with Indigenous communities to be able to really kind of, I guess, look at it from a holistic lens of how can they support their business, but also ensure long term they're supporting at-risk youth and Indigenous employment and ensuring those perspectives are really respected and represented at all levels of their business. So I think a really collaborative approach and looking at how can you get people interested in entrepreneurship and business development on the ground versus in a classroom necessarily. I think especially with smaller regions, more rural communities, having that on the ground and actually seeing the impact of what you're doing can be a big difference in spurring some of that entrepreneurial thinking and risk taking.
Perfect. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the role models who's now the Prime Minister of Canada, who was born in Fort Smith in Denendeh, and went on to be governor of the Bank of Canada as well as the governor of the Bank of England. So there's lots of entrepreneurs. Role models are really important. Within the communities, the list is very long of people who have started businesses who have been very successful and continue to contribute to both the local economy as well as to the national and international work that's being done. So, yeah, it's very important doing things in a sustainable way. I mean, that is kind of the northern way of doing what it is that we're doing. The only time we've ever found orphan and abandoned mines and sort of unsustainable development has largely been when capital comes in from elsewhere and doesn't have an interest in what happens to the communities. We've put in place a lot of regulations so that doesn't continue to happen. So, for example, when the diamond mines close, they're going to leave the place in a much better shape than what they found it, even though they'll never replace the lakes that they drained. But it's not going to be the same as when you go out into the many orphan and abandoned mines that are here right now and find old communities that are falling into the ground or even worse, toxic contaminants that are leaching into the environment. So we don't do things like that anymore. We do things in a much better way, and we'll continue to keep on improving. And I think role models are essential.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, Hillary, go ahead. Jump back in there.
You just spurred a thought in my head, Chris, around orphan mines, because that's been a discussion on the housing world of you have businesses that come in, create communities. Is it a mine with a community attached, or is it a community that has a mine that supports some of the work that gets done there? So even just that longer term thinking, it's not just the economic or entrepreneurial side, but it's stability. It's how comfortable do people feel within their communities and the social supports they get from that. And I think that also plays a big role. You're not going to be an entrepreneur. You're not going to come up with new ideas if the town you're in wouldn't necessarily exist potentially if that mine shuts down unexpectedly. So I think some of that longer term thinking from the businesses that do start up is definitely critical there as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that question, Stephen. We have a second question from Steve. And the question is, what concrete steps can be taken to improve access to skilled trades training and employment opportunities in northern communities, particularly in ways that genuinely build indigenous and northern capacity? Experience has shown that while many companies present themselves as indigenous-led, they often function more as a conduit to divert funding south rather than as a vehicle for sustainable skills development. How can we ensure that initiatives are both authentic and impactful? Chris, you jumped in. It's like Jeopardy, Chris. He's ready right away on the button.
I was just thinking maybe Steve should answer this because it sounds like he's got a insight on activities that maybe some of the other folks around the table don't. For sure, I think access to skills training, apprenticeship programs are very challenging to deliver in the circumpolar because of the size of the classrooms. So in universities like Memorial, you'll have an intro class of 100 students or 50 students. In the trades, you never have numbers like that. And you would never have a shop or facilities that would allow you to kind of support that much engagement. You'd have to bring students to a central location where there is facilities and curriculum and faculty who can deliver the programming, which then means you're removing students from their homes to be able to do things, which is not the apprenticeship way, um, but it's the model that we have. So there are ways of doing it. I think distance delivery is a good one. I think being able to build the critical mass of having the infrastructure at the community level is really essential. And the other issue around joint ventures and funds flowing south, I mean, I think we see that on a number of different levels, not just in the skilled trades. And so I wouldn't want to just paint the tradespeople with that brush, nor would I want to necessarily um, excuse everybody who does that. Anybody who is living here in the circumpolar Arctic really wants the circumpolar Arctic to benefit. And back to Hillary's point, that's the long-term view that we have of the communities here. Is not that they're going to disappear. They've been here, they're going to continue to be here. They'll keep on changing and evolving relative to whatever is going on around us.
Go ahead. Yeah, Randy.
Yes, thank you, Chris and Hillary. It's very interesting what you are pointing out here. I think we have to face that around in the Arctic regions, aging population is of course a challenge. And I think Hillary mentioned business clusters, and I think that the clusters can drive economic growth by creating jobs, attracting investment, and fostering new business opportunities, and that could attract either young people to stay in the communities. But of course, if aging population is a challenge, then we also need to attract young people to move into the community. So of course, there will be a balance using the locals resources, the unique local resources that are available, but we also know an aging population. So this is a balance of how you could get enough labor. But I think what we have seen as a success factor for those who are creating businesses in the Arctic regions is that they feel an identity to the region, and they have an origin in the region. So I think that is two key factors. You feel an identity for this community, and I think that is a very good starting point.
Something that I feel, and I'll just share my own experience again, having colleagues that I know in Yellowknife, etc., is that, and to be honest, this is a global issue. Funny enough, the skilled labor shortage is a global issue. I think people in Toronto, for example, complain the same amount as other places that I've been as well on this same thing. But um, the biggest problem that we've seen is that if you're in a underserved community, right? Then if you do become a skilled tradesperson, your economic opportunity greatly increases by leaving that community. because the demand is very high in other places. And so I think, my thought just around this generally is the more that, again, northern communities and northern industry can grow to be self-sustaining at scale, the greater opportunity it is that people would have no reason to leave, right? Because there's less desire to be whisked away. Because I think that is just an inherent challenge of doing something highly skilled that's globally in demand. You can see some risk there. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I think building on that, the fact that students will leave the North and get training in the South, or go and then once they have their credentials and competencies, they go and work in the South. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they come back at some point. And there is a actual within the research itself. As we age, we tend to go back home, and so that's also an interesting component. Is that you have the material, you have the intangibles, and you have what is quality of life. And the quality of life that you get in a community is different than what you would get in a big city. Perhaps some people are attracted to Toronto because that's where they want to be, or they're attracted to Tuktoyaktuk because that's home. And so there are all of those people. And I think to this question, our goal as post-secondary institutions, I'm Aurora College, so we want to train more here, and people have the freedom to take those things wherever they need to take them, as well as into the communities to build those businesses and opportunities. Part of our challenge is we don't offer enough training here. And so we do rely a great deal on Southern institutions to train, or international institutions to train, or we bring in skilled labor who have already trained from other parts of the world. The really interesting thing is some of those folks who come here fall in love with being here and stay and have families and start businesses. I'm okay with that.
Great points. Hillary.
That last point you made there is, I'm very passionate about that one. Working with international education in Newfoundland and Labrador, that was very much the lens. We have people who've moved here to a small little island in Canada. How do we capitalize on the people that already have some of those roots there? So I think with the training aspect, it's where are the niches that are going to be best trained in northern regions? How do you get people there, establish their life? They're not going to want to move. That's a lot of work to move away. Once you're already established, you have your networks, you meet someone, you fall in love. So really thinking of how do you attract people in a meaningful way so that they can start putting some of those roots into the area too.
I think Hillary was implying that there should be a Northern Communities Netflix dating special to really kind of drive it home.
You know what? That's innovative.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to kick it back to Lisa. We're reaching the end of our panel as well as our Q&A. So, Lisa, if you want to hop in here. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We have come to the end of our time together. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy schedules to be panelists, moderators, as well as participants in this webinar. I'd like to once again sincerely thank Michael, Chris, Hillary, and Randy for sharing their time and expertise with us today. Thanks to all of you for attending and for your great questions. And if you enjoyed today's event, please check out future UArctic events and discussions. This is one part of a 4-part series. There's one more part, which is the Arctic Health and Wellbeing webinar taking place on October 22nd. I indicated earlier, this session has been recorded, and I will be sharing the link in an upcoming email. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that. That is it from me. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.